Like you said, it's virus free. So we can't consider it completely to be virus free. And I'll tell you why. Because there are issues with Linux as well. But due to its inherent security mechanisms. Now, what are inherent security mechanisms? Despite being a multi-user operating system, it still follows the rules of access control. Okay. So suppose there are three of us sitting on one Linux operating system. It does not mean that I can access what the other people are using. Okay. There are strict boundaries. The commands that I can access, the folders that I can access will be limited to me. Okay. It will be restricted to me. I cannot cross that boundary. Okay, so this is one of the main reasons why Linux is more secure than other operating systems. And then the ease of access that we get with CLI. Okay, now I know how great GUI is. So whatever we are, looking at right now, where I'm writing this Linux Y open source pre-package, and we are looking at different folders here. This is all GUI, graphical user interface. It's great for regular users. But for administration purposes, for launching out necessary commands, we need to learn CLI, command line interface. Okay, why command line interface? Because number one, if you master it, you're going to find out that how easy it is and how fast it is to get your job done using CLI rather than GUI. Suppose if I have to delete a particular folder, then I would have to, go on my GUI, go to the parent folder, then go to its child folder, then take a file and delete it. And then after deleting it, I will go to recycle bin. After going to recycle bin, I'll remove it from the recycle bin. With CLI, it's very easy. You write a command like rm. I'll talk about that command very soon, but it's that simple. You traverse to a specific directory with one command cd. You pick up a file by using ls. Okay, by checking out what files are there inside a directory or a folder, and you use a command called rm, and your job is done. It's that easy. Okay, so when you have mastered CLI, you're never going to go back to GUI. Trust me. Okay. Now, obviously, on our proprietary operating systems like Mac OS and Windows, we have been used to GUI. So that is why it is a little difficult for us to make a transition to CLI. But with Linux, we are going to see how powerful is their CLI. Okay. Or we also call it as terminal. So how powerful is the terminal and why it is preferred over GUI. Okay. So these are some of the reasons why we are going to pick Linux. Okay. Now, open source pre-packaged security mechanisms, and if at a certain point of time we think that we don't have enough tools or we don't have enough software, then we can obviously download those software or tools from free repositories. Okay, from free repositories. Again, you can do this via CLI. You don't even have to go to somebody's GitHub repository and download that tool from there. It's this easy. Okay, so that is the reason why we are choosing Linux. Okay, and then I'm going to write Linux. Which Linux? For this particular purpose of learning cybersecurity, there are a lot of Linux operating systems or Linux distributions available. Which one or which one should I start with? Okay, so anyone comment down or write, just unmute yourself and tell me like which Linux would you like to go with, or how many security distributions of Linux do you know about? Kali Linux, obviously. Kali Linux. Anyone else? Any other distribution that you are aware of?
Red Hat,
See,
Ubuntu.
Red Hat is a vendor. Okay, So Red Hat does not offer really a security based distribution. Okay, that's a general purpose distribution which is used for system administration. But okay, we can also use that. Okay, the I guess it's RHEL offered by Red Hat. Then you also have Ubuntu. That's okay. You can use that as well. And then there is one more distribution that we were talking about, which is Parrot OS. Okay. Now consider these two to be general purpose. Okay, so if you have to learn Linux for system administration or to see how you can deploy servers, or if you want to start learning coding on Linux, you can use these two. Okay, but they do not have security tools present in them. Okay, they do not have security tools present in them. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't use these for security, for learning cybersecurity. You can, but what will happen is that you will have to download those specific tools again and again from the repositories. Okay, so suppose we launch a tool for web hacking, which is Burp Suite. It will not be present in Red Hat or Ubuntu, but it will be present in Kali Linux and Parrot OS. If I want to use a tool for password cracking, let's suppose John, then it will be present in Kali Linux and it will be present in Parrot OS. It won't be present in Red Hat or Ubuntu. So, like I said, you would have to download them. So, let's say that on a per day basis, we are going to work with at least 5 to 6 tools. Okay. For our labs, we are going to work with at least 5 to 6 tools every day. Okay, and some days we are going to introduce new tools because in cybersecurity there are different domains. Let's suppose we take a domain called steganography where you hide data inside images. Okay, so there are at least 5 to 6 tools for that as well. Now, yes, we can install them on Red Hat and Ubuntu, but why go through that hassle? Because they are already present in Kali and Parrot, so let's use them. Understood? Makes sense? Yes or no? Yes or no, guys?
That makes sense.
What? I couldn't understand you. Okay. So you've got Kali Linux, you've got Parrot OS, then you also have Arc Linux or Black Arc Linux that is also used for cybersecurity, but it is highly, heavyweight. By heavyweight means that it consumes a lot of system resources. That is why initially I'm not going to recommend that one to you. Okay. So you take any one. You take Kali Linux or you take Parrot OS. It's completely up to you. Okay. So Kali Linux versus Parrot OS. Okay. So Kali Linux is updated periodically. This one is updated periodically but less frequently. Consumes less resources. High resources. Okay. Now, what could be considered as high? In case you are using a laptop with 4 GB of RAM, then I will definitely suggest you to go with Parrot. Even if you're using a laptop or a desktop with 8 GB of RAM or 6 GB of RAM, I would still recommend you to go with Parrot. You ask me why? I'll tell you why, because we are going to use other machines as well. Okay, we are going to deploy vulnerable machines as well, and we have to hack into them. So that is why if you have resources till 8 GB, I would suggest you to go with Parrot. Okay, plus after interacting with you guys, you know I could make out this thing that you guys are either involved in DevOps or in programming, okay, or in development. So the tools that you want for your office work as well, they will be present in Parrot Security OS as well. Okay, so you can use that and you will be good to go. But if you have ample resources like 12 gigs of RAM, 256 GB of SSD, then you can have Kali Linux and you can have all the tools on Kali Linux. Okay. Like I said, it consumes high resources, so that is the problem. Okay. But it is completely up to you. It is also dependent on which type of hypervisor you are using. So I am pointing arrows towards these two software that I have on my computer. So can anyone tell me the arrows that I've pointed? What are those softwares? Can you guys tell me what are?
VirtualBox,
Yes,
Fusion, VMware Fusion.
right. Okay, awesome. Thanks. So to run Kali Linux or Parrot OS, like I told you, I leave it to you. It's completely your choice. Whatever you want to use, you use it. And unless and until you want a laptop with just Kali Linux or Parrot OS on it, you will have to go with the other alternative, which is using Linux as a VM. VM is going to be a virtual machine. It's going to act exactly as your host operating system. Okay, your Mac OS or your Windows OS. Okay, but you can't just run it on your host operating system. You need a software for that as well. Okay, so the two softwares that I have pointed here, VirtualBox and VMware Fusion, their technical name is hypervisor. And to be more specific, they are known as T2 hypervisor. Okay. So now what is a T2 hypervisor? T2 hypervisor is going to sit on top of your host operating system, Mac or Windows. And over this T2 hypervisor, you are going to deploy a virtual machine. Okay. So what is a virtual machine? Virtual machine is basically a software based representation of an operating system. And all the files that it is going to have, okay, all the configurations that you are going to give it are going to be virtual, are going to be software based. So suppose this virtual machine is going to consume some CPU, it's going to consume some RAM, it's going to consume some storage, it's going to consume some networking components. Okay, so let's say NIC, which is network interface card. All this is going to be virtualized: vCPU, VRAM, vStorage, and vNIC. How do we get these resources? How do we get these resources? By taking some portion of the actual hardware resources. Okay, so I'll just give you a small example here. I'll draw a basic diagram. So this right here is my Mac OS. Okay, this right here is my Mac OS. Mac OS is sitting on top of the hardware provided by Apple. Okay, this is going to be hardware. On top of this, I install either of these two. I install either VirtualBox or VMware Fusion. So let's say I have installed VMware Fusion here. And on top of VMware Fusion, I can run as many operating systems as I can. So I can keep Kali Linux. I can keep a Windows machine as well. Okay, which I can hack into. Okay, so what will happen here, that every virtual machine, so these are known as VMs, virtual machines. This is known as a hypervisor. This is my host OS and this is the hardware. And what does the hardware provide me? Hardware provides me CPU, a RAM, okay, provides me hard drive, and it provides me a network interface card through which I can communicate with other devices. So it's for networking. So all the four things required for a computer to fully perform its job in a functional manner You require CPU, RAM, hard drive, and NIC. Okay. So when VMware Fusion or Oracle VirtualBox sit on top of my operating system, now this operating system could be yours if you're using Windows, so it's going to be Microsoft Windows. What this particular tool or hypervisor is going to do is that it is going to create logical, bifurcation of my actual CPU, RAM, hard drive, and NIC, and it's going to create virtual versions of these components, and it will give some virtual components to Kali Linux, and it will give some virtual components to Windows. Okay, and that is how it is going to work. Okay, so that is why we use a hypervisor. Okay, now in case of enterprise hypervisors, or in case of enterprise data centers, right, there you have a different approach. There you do not install your hypervisor on top of your host operating system. You install the hypervisor using a bootable disk or a bootable pen drive on your piece of hardware. Now this hardware is not cannot be compared to my Mac OS hardware or my HP laptops. It is, enterprise hardware, big servers, 64 GB of 64 GB of RAM, 16 processor cores. So those are the big ones, and we are not here to talk about that. But if at some point of time you need help with that, I can definitely help you out. So do not hesitate to ask me a question regarding that as well. So this is what we are going to do with our lab. Okay. And now when we are going to install this virtual machine, guys, what is going to happen? When we go to the operating system of our choice, we are going to get ISO or something which is known as OVA. Can anyone tell me the difference between these two? Yes, guys, can you tell me the difference between these two?
It's a virtualization format OVA.
Yes.
ISO is hardware related.
Yes, great. So
Image.
ISO is just going to be an image of the operating system that does not just link itself to virtualization. Okay, if you want to single boot a system, or if you want to use this ISO to create an operating system that is going to be run as a single boot or a dual boot on a piece of hardware, you can do that as well. Okay, ISO can be used for virtualization as well, but its main purpose is that it's just a format, right? Like how CDs are. When you have to install your operating system from a CD or from a bootable pen drive, then you are going to use ISO. So if you want to run two operating systems on the hardware without using virtualization software so that it can take all your system resources, you are going to use ISO. What is OVA? OVA is short for Open Virtual Appliance. What is the difference here? ISO is usually used for booting your machine on your hardware. Here you do not have to use an ISO necessarily, but it can also be used on top of hypervisors. Okay, that's the difference. It gives you both the options. You cannot use OVA for single booting or dual booting your system. Okay, that's the difference here, because OVA is meant to work on these hypervisors or these virtual machine players. Okay, OVA is a universal format. OVA is a universal format. Now, why have they created it universal? Why? Because you have different virtual machine players. You have VMware Fusion, you have VMware Workstation, you have VirtualBox, and you have another which is known as Parallels. So all these are different hypervisors. So if I create a virtual machine and I put it in OVA format, it means that it is going to become universal. By universal, I want to tell you that it will run on all these virtual machine players without any problem. Got it, guys? So that is what OVA is. Okay. And it also tells us that it's a virtual appliance. Now, in most of the cases, how OVAs are created, OVAs are pre-packaged. Now, what does pre-package mean? You download an OVA file for a particular operating system, and as soon as you install it on your VirtualBox or your VMware Fusion, you will see that it won't ask you to configure RAM, or it won't ask you to configure CPU. It won't ask you about the whole installation process. It's pre-packaged. Okay, so they already give you a certain resource. As like they'll automatically assign you 2 GB of RAM, 2 CPU cores, okay, and 20 GB of hard drive. So that's how it is. Okay, so yesterday, going back to what we were talking about yesterday, when I told you guys that you need to download Kali Linux. So I go to kali.org. You go to download. Okay, if you want to install Kali Linux on your hardware directly, like you have Windows or Mac, then you need to use bare metal. Otherwise, we are going to use virtual machines. Okay. This one is built for VMware. This one is built for VirtualBox. Okay. So usually in most of the cases, VMware either requires ISO or a different format, which has an extension .vm. I'll show that to you. So when I downloaded this, I have this Kali Linux 2021. I unzipped everything that I got, and finally I got a file extension which is .vmware vm. And if you look at the kind of this file, it is VM bundle. So it's created already for us. We don't have to configure the RAM. We don't have to configure anything at all. Okay. If you don't believe me, let me show you. So I go to VMware Fusion and I go to, wait a second, I'll go to here. I'll click create a new virtual machine. I'll click install from disk or image, and I will do what? I'll use another disk or disk image. I'll go to downloads. I'll go to here and I can use this VM bundle and I can deploy it. Okay. Why it is not taking it? Because I already have this VM bundle on my operating system. So this is what you are going to choose. And once you have done this, you will get a virtual machine like the one I have. Okay. And if you want to see how many system resources does this machine take, then let me show you. So automatically it took 2 GB of RAM, 4 processor cores. Folder sharing is on, which means I can communicate with my host OS and share folders and files via my virtual machine. The network adapter was already set up. Okay, so it is in the same network as my Mac OS or as my host operating system. Okay, so this is how it is working. And same goes out for the VirtualBox OVA that you will download. Okay, if you download it and deploy it on VirtualBox, it's like a plug and play option. You don't have to configure unnecessary stuff. But obviously you will have a question like at some point of time, if you need to change some settings, is that possible? Yes, that's possible. You can go to the settings and you can change the processor. You can change the processor cores, you can change the memory allotted to it, but you can't do it unless and until this machine is shut down. Okay, so what you will have to do is you will have to shut down your machine and you can configure this for yourself. Okay guys, so I'll just stop sharing my screen for a minute and I'll just ask you if you have some questions related to this. So please go ahead and ask me some questions related to this. Don't worry. Okay, just go ahead and tell me if you have any doubts here. Yes or no? Is it clear to everyone? Do you have any other doubts like why we are using Linux, why we are doing this or why we are doing that, why we can go with Parrot Linux or we can go with Kali Linux? Is that clear to all of you? Could you just say yes or no? If not yes, then I can explain that thing again to you. Praveen, Naveen, clear?
Yes.
Okay, no doubt at all
Yes.
here. Okay, okay, great.
I have one doubt.
Yeah,
Yesterday I
sure.
have downloaded ISO Kali Linux and also launched an VirtualBox.
Okay,
Is it okay? It is running fine as of now. So
okay.
can I delete it and re-download virtual VM related ISO?
So you want VMware Fusion. Okay.
Yes.
Now see, let me show you. So if you go to share content and let me start sharing my screen again. So what will happen here, Praveen? Let me show you. So if I go to back again to kali.org, then you will have these two options. Okay, so when you go to download, when if you want to download it for VMware Fusion, okay, or if you want to download it for any other VMware player like VMware Workstation or VMware Workstation Pro, you'll get a customized bundle. If you want an ISO, then you would have to go with bare metal, where you have the option to, you know, from the beginning or from the installation stages, you can configure each and everything because there are different aspects to Linux. There is a bootloader which will bootload several components when your machine is starting up. How much drive or how much hard drive do you want to configure from the installer? You can do that. But if your question is just this, that you want to download it for VMware Fusion or VMware Workstation, yes, you can do that, and it will come in a format called w.vmware VM. That will be the specific format that you will get when you install it for VMware. If it is working perfectly fine on VirtualBox, I would suggest you to keep it as it is. No need to, shift it to VMware Fusion or VMware Workstation, because what happens with VMware Workstation is that either you need to purchase a license or you will only be able to run one virtual machine for free. If you want to run more virtual machines on VMware Workstation, then what you will have to do is you will have to purchase the Pro license. Now, what happens is that on the internet, if you just type license for VMware Workstation, you'll get it. Okay. But then sometimes that is hard to find. So VirtualBox is completely free to use. You can run as many virtual machines as you want. Make sense? Got it, Praveen?
Yes. Yes. One more question. Could you please scroll down for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
This. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me.
Scroll down. I
Okay.
have downloaded some other. Scroll down. Scroll down. Yes, I have downloaded this one.
Okay.
This
So this is going to be
installer.
an okay. This is going to be an
Installer.
ISO, right?
Yes, this one I have installed and launched on VirtualBox. That's what I am telling. So is it
Yes.
okay if it is
Yeah, it's
running
it's
fine?
okay. It's okay. If it is, see, the end goal is to make your virtual machine run fine. I'll tell you, on my Mac OS, I have tried working with Kali Linux and Parrot Linux on VirtualBox, but in my case it did not used to work properly. Okay, let me be very honest. Then I switched to VMware Fusion and everything runs like a breeze. I don't have to worry about my system lagging or giving me unnecessary errors. It's completely up to you. And in most of the cases for Windows, VirtualBox runs completely fine. And now you must be asking, then why do I have VirtualBox? Now I have VirtualBox because there are some, distributions or some lab VMs that I use, okay, they work better on VirtualBox rather than VMware Fusion. And I've seen one thing, that if I have to run Windows based VMs, like if I have to run Windows 7 VM or Windows 8 VM, VMware Fusion will give me some issues. So VirtualBox will run it perfectly. Now the only question is like, how do I connect two virtual machines together? So I just put them in the same network and they can communicate with each other. Okay. So your end goal is to
Yes.
try the virtual machine out, work with it a few times, try to launch Firefox a few times, try to browse something, and it will automatically adapt to the environment that you have given it. And maybe in a day or two, you will find out whether it is giving you some lag or it is giving you some error. And that is the time when you need to decide whether you want to go with a pre-built image or not. Okay, so that's what I tell everyone. Just play around with it because it takes some time to adapt to your system resources as well. Okay, because at that particular time when you launch your virtual machine, it will not start taking all the RAM. It will not start taking all the processor cores unless and until you perform some tasks. You will never be able to find out like how much resources does it require from your host operating system. Got it? Okay. Then I told you guys about Parrot as well. So this is parrotsec.org. Okay. Now on parrotsec.org, you have two options. Okay. You have Parrot here, which is home edition. The other one is security edition. And you don't have to go with the third one right now. So you guys need to download the security edition, not the home edition. Home edition is as simple as Windows. Okay, here you are not going to get any tools. You will have to download the security edition. And even for the security edition, you have the virtual appliance, which is OVA, or here you will get an ISO. Okay, so it's going to be like this. So it's completely up to you whether you want to go with Kali Linux or Parrot OS. Okay. And maybe at some point of time when we have to start Android pen testing or smartwatch pen testing, then we are going to install Kali Net Hunter. But that completely depends on the availability of a smartwatch with you guys, or if you want to run Kali Net Hunter on your Android OS. Okay, that's up to you. But you don't have to root your device for that. I'll come to that when we start that. So for now, this much is more than enough. Okay, and again, I will ask all of you if you have any doubts. If not, then I will proceed with the next portion of today's class.
Excuse me, Anjali.
All good? Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I was late for the class. Could you go give a glance of what happened in the starting and about the installation process of this Kali?
Oh, sure, sure, sure. So I just talked about Linux, why we should use Linux, initially for cybersecurity. Okay. There are, different domains in cybersecurity. There are different domains in, programming as well. Okay. Now you could be creating something for the web. You could be creating something as a standalone software. You could be deploying a cloud, you could be creating, software for cloud. Okay, so now how does Linux come into play here? Because Linux being open source, number one, it's free. It gives you variety of options to go ahead with each and everything. Okay, so now since we need it for cybersecurity, and initially we are going to start with offensive cybersecurity, which means that we are going to attack machines, attack networks, attack web applications. So I gave you 2 to 3 options like which one you should go with. So you've got Kali Linux, which is KL, you've got Parrot OS, and you've got Arc Linux. Okay, so these are used for pen testing or offensive cybersecurity. So I told you that this is heavyweight, this is lightweight, this is extremely heavyweight. Okay, it takes up a lot of system resources. It is used by professionals in professional environments when they have to, go through actual real world pen tests for their clients. So Kali Linux comes in two formats. One could be ISO, the other one could be OVA. So OVA stands for Open Virtual Appliance, which means that this virtual machine will run on all the VM players irrespective of their vendor. Okay, so could run on VirtualBox, could run on VMware Fusion, could run anywhere. Okay, then you've got ISO, which is actually used for single booting or dual booting, but it can also run perfectly on these VM players. Okay, the difference here is that ISO, with an ISO, you would have to, you know, create each and everything. You will have to assign it memory resources, you will have to assign it CPU cores, you will have to give it hard drive allocation as well. You will have to decide whether you want to go with thin disk provisioning or thick disk provisioning. Now thick disk and thin disk is that with thick disk, if you want 500 GB for your operating system, you will get it as soon as you create your operating system. Okay, with thin disk, they will not give you 500 GB in one go. They will give you 500 GB in bits and pieces, in increments. Okay, so that's how it works. But then you need to configure other things as well, like your grub bootloader. How can you configure your repositories? So I told you that for the initial classes, go with an OVA or a format which is VMware.vm, which comes for VMware Fusion or VMware Workstation. So that is what just I talked about. And so if you go with OVA or VMware VM, it's like a plug and play thing. Okay, you take that file, you put it on VMware Fusion or on VirtualBox, and it will run perfectly. It will already have a RAM allotted to it. It will already have some hard disk space allotted to it. It will already have some processor cores allotted to it. So that's the only difference. Okay, that is something that we just talked about right now. Nothing else.
So you mean to say here, no, the virtual box, after downloading the virtual box, the Kali Linux to be dumped into that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what kind of Kali you are going to use to deploy on VirtualBox? Go ahead with an OVA image. Okay, OVA stands for Open Virtual Appliance and works perfectly on all the hypervisors. So VirtualBox is a hypervisor. This is a hypervisor. So there's a technical term for all these VM players, and that is hypervisor. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what I talked about right now. So now we are going to start with the basics of Linux, and obviously there is a lot to Linux. Linux is like an ocean. Now, if we start studying Linux, we could take days, we could take months as well, just understanding Linux. But all we need to go through here is we need to understand those capabilities of Linux which can help us in understanding cybersecurity better. Okay, so I want to take this time to tell you and teach you how we can, map different directories and files to the concepts of cybersecurity. So for that, I'm just going to take you to Linux first. Okay, this right here is my Linux, Kali Linux to be specific. And when you install Kali Linux, okay, when you install Kali Linux, like the way that I just told you, you're going to get this, and it will use default credentials, which is Kali Kali. Kali being the username, Kali being the password. Okay, you want to change it? I'll show you how you can change it. But for now, let's first explore the environment that we have. Okay. Now, this is the generic environment that is given to you when you install it for the first time. Now, obviously, you can change the wallpaper and stuff. I'm using a dark wallpaper so that I can write here as well. So that's the only reason. Okay. This right here is your terminal. Okay, where you can enter a certain number of commands. Okay, well, there are a lot of commands for Linux, and any command that applies to Ubuntu will apply here. Any command that applies to Parrot Linux will apply here on Kali Linux as well. Okay, So don't worry that if you have to find out that if a folder contains a specific number of files, will the commands vary for different types of Linux distributions? No. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's Linux. It solves a specific purpose, but it's Linux. So that's how it's going to work. Okay. You're going to click here. So this is the GUI. Okay, GUI for directories. Like we have my computer on Windows. Okay, or Smart Finder like we have on Mac OS. Similarly, we have this for our Kali Linux or any other Linux. So the first thing that you go to is this icon called computer, and you're going to go to this file system. Okay. Now, when we look at Windows, how is the grouping made? The grouping is essentially made on the basis of drives. Okay, the different drives that we have, Windows C, D, and E, where most of your programs or the most of the stuff which is used for running your OS perfectly is installed on C. Here, everything has a clear distinction. Okay, everything has a clear distinction. This is what you have. If I click here, see if I right now you see a disk icon here, but as soon as I click here in the empty space, you get a slash. Now what is this slash? So let me again use my pen here. Okay. So basically when you click on file system, you're going to get something which looks like this, which is a slash. And inside this slash, you are going to find some directories. Now, what is a directory? Like we have folders in Mac or we have folders in Windows. Here, the specific name or the technical name used for those folders is directory. Okay. So there is no, no need to panic if sometime I call it folder or I, call it a directory. That's one and the same thing. Okay. Initially. So this is slash and this is actually known as the root directory. This is known as the root directory. Not to be confused with the root user's home directory. If some of you have worked on Linux, if some of you have some experience working on Linux, then you must be thinking that I'm teaching you something wrong, but no. You have root here as well, which I have marked, but this is known as root's home directory, and I'll come to this soon. Okay. Right now what you have is root directory or the ultimate parent directory where you have most of your directories. So anything which starts with the complete slash means that you're going to find all your folders and all your directories here. Okay, so let's suppose if I want to check out where am I right now in my terminal, because when you launch your terminal you are present in some directory. So I'll launch a very basic command which is pwd and it tells me that I'm in /home/Kali, which means I am inside this directory /home/Kali. Okay, and if I click my pointer here, I will be able to see that I am in /home/Kali. Okay, so slash, the first slash that you see is the root directory or the ultimate parent directory where all your other folders or directories are. Okay, I hope there is no doubt here. So I'll go back. And right now we see a lot of directories here. Okay, root, boot, dev, etc, home, libraries, lib32, lib64, libx32, some related to media, removable media, mnt, mount, opt, proc for processes, run, sbin, user, temporary. What do all these mean? Okay, let me start with the first directory, which is bin. Okay, let me use my pen here as well. So guys, you have bin here, and bin actually stands for binary. Okay, bin stands for binary. Now I just want to ask you, like when you use your terminal and you start writing something, what is that? Is that a software? Is that a command? Is that a script? What is that? When you write something on your command line terminal or your command line interface, what is it? Like if some of you have experience with Linux, then you know that there is something called CD, there is something called PWD, there is something called ls, there is something called who am I? What are all this? What are these? Are these any Python based scripts? Are these any programs written in C? What do you think, guys?
These are comments.
Yes, these are commands. Okay. We as users call them commands. Okay. But they are, small tools. Okay. These are small tools that get the job done for us. Now, how do they work? What are these actually? So basically, these are binaries. Okay. Now, what is a binary? Binary is something that is executable. Like it could be exe, it could be DMG, it could be bin, or it could be deb, or it could be any other executable format. Okay. So for us, we are Linux. If we consider ourselves Linux administrators, then all we need to do is just write these commands down for us and it gets the job done. But suppose at some point of time, I feel like I need a specific command and I don't have it already on Linux, then I would have to create a binary for that. Okay. Who does that? Developers. Okay. Or programmers. How do they do it? I'll show you. Okay. So all the commands, guys, that we enter, let's suppose if I go here to my uh, terminal here, and if I want to see what is inside this directory. If I want to see what is inside this directory, then I will launch a command called ls. And what will this do? It will tell me what kind of files do I have in this particular folder or directory called /home/Kali. Okay. So this command must be residing somewhere. Okay. Because since we are technical people, we need to know where these commands are, where they reside, how do they work, what gets invoked when we use this command, which process gets invoked, how do they interact with hardware, okay, devices, the input and output devices. So we need to know that. Okay. So on your file system, whenever you launch a command, they get launched from the bin directory. If you don't believe me, let me show you. Okay. So these are all the commands, guys. Okay. I'll keep on scrolling down. So liill, and somewhere here I am also going to see ls. Okay, this is the ls command. And if we try to look at it, properties, it resides in bin, and it's actually a small piece of binary that helps us in getting our job done. Okay, it's a binary, so which means it was written somewhere. Okay, it was written somewhere. So for that also I'm going to show you something. Now I should have that tool already on my system. I actually don't. Till the time I talk about other commands, I will install this tool as well. Okay, unable to find it. Okay, we'll talk about this, don't worry. So let's talk about some other command. If I have to check who am I, which means which current user is logged in on this operating system. For that, I'm going to write who am I. Okay, I am a user named Kali. Okay, where does this command reside? This command resides in the bin directory. Okay, or the directory for binaries. Okay, somewhere here it's going to be present. If I want to change my directory, okay, right now I'm in /home/Kali, and let's say I want to go from /home/Kali to another directory called downloads. How will I do that? I will come back here. Okay, and I will write cd space downloads, and now I am in a directory called downloads. So which command did I use? Cd means change directory. How did I come here? Using this command. And how did this command work? It is a binary that started working when I called this binary. Okay, so for users it's a command, but you need to understand that it is present in a directory called binary. Okay, we get it that all the commands that we are going to enter will be present here. But what's the purpose here? Why am I telling you this? Why am I telling you this? Number one, we need to understand how it is important to us from a cyber security perspective. So I'll tell you something here. Now, can you guys tell me, is Linux a single user operating system or a multi-user operating system?
Multi-user.
It's a multi-user operating system. Which means, let's take this scenario. Suppose me, Adhirath, is an administrator here. Okay. And let me just stop sharing my screen so that I can write down some of your names here. Okay. Let's say we have Joy, we have Raj, and we have Prashant. Okay. So let's take an example here. So we have Joy, we have Raj, and we have Prashant. And I'm going to be the administrator of this system. Okay, I'm going to be the supervisor for you guys. I'm Adhirath. So we have been allotted a Linux operating system. Okay. And I'm just your project manager. Okay, so we are developing or we are deploying an app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the network-based configurations to Joy. Okay, so Joy is handling network-based portion here. Raj is handling cloud-based portion here on this project, and Prashant is, working on the development. So that's a small project where I need to deploy some app on the cloud. So for that, I need 3 people who will work on their specific parts: network, cloud, and development. I am the manager or the team lead or the supervisor here. Okay, for this system. So when we go to Linux and map our job responsibilities or our job roles, then I will become a user who is the root user, okay, or the administrator. Just like we have administrator on Windows, we have root on Linux. Okay. So now what will I do? I was talking about the inherent security mechanisms on Linux, and I was talking about something called access control. So what will I do here, guys? I will work like this. Now Joy only needs access to network based commands. Okay, or let's say he wants to configure a network. Yeah. If you don't have any doubts for now, could you please mute yourselves like for some time, and then we'll talk about the doubts. Okay, so can you please mute yourselves, guys? Okay, cool, thanks. So Joy has to handle network based, you know, operations. And I'll give him access to some commands and I'll give him access to some tools. Raj needs access to those tools, those commands, those software through which he can get his job done. And that is for cloud. Prashant is the developer here, so I will give him access to maybe an IDE or maybe a web browser so that he can check his work. Okay. So now how Linux works, guys? Linux works in this manner. As a supervisor, as a root user. Yep. So could you mute yourself? Because there's a lot of background noise. Okay. So now what I'm going to do here is I am going to follow access control. What is access control? If you have multiple users on Linux, what you do is you limit them to their job roles. Okay. For example, I have Joy who wants to access tools like Wireshark or some other tools that can help him with this job only. But suppose if Joy asks me, hey Adhirath, can you give me access to an IDE as well, like maybe Eclipse or maybe Visual Studio? I want to learn it. I will deny that. Okay, why will I deny that? Because I'm not going to give him any unnecessary access. I want to limit him to his job roles, which is networking. That's it. So let's suppose he can now run a command called ifconfig through which he can check the network configuration, or I will give him a command which is IP tables. That's it. Raj belongs to the cloud department here. And what else does he need? He also needs access to ifconfig, or if he wants to deploy Azure, so I can give him access to maybe a CLI through which he can work on cloud. Nothing more than that. Now if Raj tells me, hey Adhirath, can you give me access to maybe some tools like Burp Suite or any password crackers, I just want to learn them. And I'll again tell him no. Why, Raj? Because your job is to configure and manage cloud, so I'll only give you those administration commands with which you can get your job done. So no unnecessary stuff, no extra privileges. Then comes Prashant. I give him access to Visual Studio Code and a browser through which he can check his deployment. Okay. Now again, Prashant comes to me. Hey Adhirath, I want to learn malware analysis and I want to learn reverse engineering. So can you give me access to a tool like Gidra so that I can perfect it? Again, I'll tell him, no, Prashant, you can't do that because this is a professional environment and I cannot give you unnecessary privileges. So the term that I've been using here, guys, is privilege. What is privilege? Privilege means something with which you can perform your job roles. Okay, you're not facing any issues, and that's it. So Linux follows the concept of least privilege. I have 20 commands, I have 30 commands for network, but I will jot out that with just 10 commands I can get my job done. So to Joy, I'm only going to give him least privilege and I'm going to give him 10 commands through which he can access the system and get his job done. Same goes for Raj and same goes for Prashant. Okay. And then there are some special commands. Okay. Then there are some special commands which need to be used, with the permissions of the root user. Okay. In cybersecurity, if you know how the bin directory works, then what you can do, guys, is you can escalate your privileges. Okay. escalation of privileges means that from Joy, I can try to, hack into Raj's account, or I can try to get the privileges that Raj has. Or from Joy, I can try to get the privileges that Prashant has. Okay. So this is what I can do. This is not something which is built in. This is using tricks. This is using hit and trial. This is using the commands that have already been given to me. I try to exploit them in such a manner that I can escalate my privileges and then I can launch dangerous attacks. Now, if I have loose privileges, then I can also become Adhirath from Joy, which means I can access all the commands that Adhirath can. Okay. So this is what it is. And how does this problem arise, or how can we fix this problem? In the bin directory. So what do you have in bin directory? In bin directory, you are able to access commands, and for launching attacks in Linux, one of those attacks or one of those attack vectors is known as privilege escalation. How do you do that? By checking the misconfigurations in the bin directory. What am I talking about? I'll just show it to you. Okay. First of all, First of all, I want to show you that example which I was talking about, the special commands that you can enter. Okay. Okay. So I go here to Kali. Okay. And suppose I want to launch a lab on a cybersecurity platform. Okay. So what happens when you launch labs on cybersecurity platforms? You actually need to have a private connection with those labs. Okay, you actually need to have a private connection with those labs. How do you do that? Via tunneling, via VPN connections. Okay, so I have a tool here. I have a tool here which helps me, launch a private network connection. Okay, so name of that tool is OpenVPN. Now let's see. First of all, who am I? I am a normal user called Kali. Right now the operating system that I'm on is also a multi-user operating system, but I have only two users here. I have a user named Kali and I have a user named Root, who is the super user of this system. So now let's see what I can do here. I want to launch that open VPN connection. So I write open VPN. Okay. So I'll go back and I write open VPN acap.95.ovpn. This is the configuration file. Don't worry about it. I'll also talk about why do we use this and what is its use. Okay. As soon as I enter it, we are going to check the logs here and we are going to see what is going to happen. It's taking its own time. These are the logs that you see when you launch something. Okay, let me launch it again as well. Okay, there you go. So we exited out of this command. Why? Because we found an error here. Cannot IOCTL tunnel set if operation not permitted. What is it trying to do? I'll tell you. So basically, it's actually trying to create a new interface for networking, for communication on my system. And as a regular user, I can't do that because here permissions are not given to me. So if I have to access this command, I will have to seek permissions from the root user. So when I have to run this command, I will write something before this, which is sudo. Okay. And now what I get, initialization sequence completed. It means that I've successfully connected to that tunnel network and I have created that interface. Why does this happen? Okay, so I hope now you can hear me. So was I mute for a lot of time or I just got muted? Can you hear me, guys?
No, Adhiraj, it's okay. Only for
Yes.
just
Okay,
5
okay, okay,
seconds.
okay, okay. No worries. Thanks. So I was talking about OpenVPN. Okay, and who is launching this tool? A regular user named Kali, a normal user. Okay. I can change this name. This is the default name given to me, guys. So don't get confused. Who is Adhirath? Who is Kali? I can change this name. I'll show you how can you change this name. So Kali, OpenVPN, space this config file. What will I do with this config file? I'll try to create a network interface. Network interface for private communication. So that's an interface which is known as tunnel interface. Tunnel is basically something that gets created when you have to talk with some service or some server through VPN, okay, privately, which will change your IP. So guys, this is the beauty of Linux. Now to create something as simple as a network interface, you require the permissions of the ultimate user or the super user. Okay. If I'm a regular user and I have to create something which is a network interface, I won't be able to do that by myself. I will have to seek my supervisor's permissions. And who's my supervisor on this operating system? That's the ultimate user, which is root. There are two ways of launching this command. Either I can first change my user from Kali to root, or I can still be this user, but before I run this command, I write sudo. Sudo will do what for me? Sudo will do this. It will still make me the user that I am, which is Kali, but it will grant permissions from the root user. And then with those permissions, I will be able to run that command. But if I think that, once I get sudo permissions, I'm good to go. I am the god on this computer. No. Why? Because sudo logs everything. Sudo logs everything. So if any one of you is a Linux administrator or you know about Linux, then you must be knowing that whenever you do something on Linux, all your activities are logged. Okay. So if you think of hacking into a system, good enough. You hack into it, but then in the end, remove the logs as well. Okay. Why? Because if you do not remove the logs, then your whole, act goes to vain. Why? Because you will get caught. That's how simple it is. Obviously, that's the last process. When you have successfully hacked into a machine, you will remove those logs, but everything gets logged here. That's what I want to tell you. Okay. How does this relate to what I was talking about with the problems in bin directory, and how does this map to cybersecurity? How does it help us out as an ethical hacker? Now, I'm a regular user named Kali. I use this command called OpenVPN. Now, how can this simple command, which is used for creating VPN connections, going to help me in becoming a root? Okay. How will it help me in escalating my privileges or expanding my privileges? Okay. How will it do that? So I'll give you a very basic example here. I will go to a website. Basically, what I have to do in this case is I have to write an exploit. Exploit means that I'll write some piece of code, or I'll write some small script, or I'll write a bash script, or I'll write a simple command which will help me change my access, or which will help me change my privileges. So from a regular user who has just access to two or three commands, I will do something and I'll become root user, and I'll do something malicious there, and people will think that it was the root user who caused this attack, not this user named Kali or not this user named Adhirath. Okay. So this is just a simple website that we will discuss in utmost detail. Don't worry about it. What I'll do here is, because OpenVPN is present inside bin directory. OpenVPN is present inside bin directory. So if I write OpenVPN, I can use this simple command. And what will I do? I will escalate my privileges and I'll become Kali to root user. And once I become root user on that system, guys, no one can stop me. I can change the permissions. I can bring in other users. I can bring in other hackers to use this system. Because once you are a root user, you have almost all the permissions on this system. Okay. Similarly, you guys must have heard about something which is known as insider threats. Okay. So I was working on a research project on how to prevent insider threats using blockchain. Now I'll just give you a small example here. We know that every day we are facing a lot of cyber security threats, and that is why companies have invested in good mechanisms, and companies have invested in great mechanisms to help them protect themselves from these attacks. Now, these attacks will prevent you from getting hacked from third parties or outsiders. What if your administrator is involved with the attackers, right? And what if the root user on a particular system is involved with the attackers? So this becomes an insider threat. Okay. Again, activities of root user are also logged. Whoever you are on a Linux system, whether you have all the permissions or whether you have some permissions, your activities will be logged. But then being the root user or being a root user, you will be able to remove those logs for yourself. And then if you launch something, if you launch an attack, then the organization which you are in and which you are trying to destroy, maybe for some purpose, maybe they didn't treat you well, or maybe they didn't give you an appraisal. Imagine the amount of damage you can cause. Okay, so this is what privilege escalation is. And one basic way of elevating your or escalating your privileges is through the bin directory. So from a basic perspective of Linux, what does bin directory do? Bin directory contains all the commands that we enter on our operating system, on our command line interface. All the commands will be present here in bin directory. That's the normal use of bin. But how does it map to cybersecurity? Because in bin directory, these commands will also be used to grant privileges. To different users on a multi-user operating system. So what can be done in that case? If we know the history and the theory of bin directory, then we can make use of our own exploits or pre-written exploits present on people's GitHub repositories, or a tool that I just showed you like this one, GTFO bins. This is also hosted on GitHub. Okay, this is also hosted on GitHub. We can use these to first escalate our privileges, become root, and then launch dangerous attacks. So this is what can happen inside the bin directory. Okay. So now guys, is it clear to all of you what is the use of bin directory? Yes or no? Or do you have any doubts here? Any doubts at all, guys? Please let me know so that I can answer them, because I won't teach the next topic right now because we only have 7 minutes.
Yeah, there seems to be good. No such doubts, but as first time, no bit confusion. I think once we get into the properties, we might understand more deeper.
Yeah, definitely. See, now we are going to meet on Monday, right? And
Yep.
today, just being the first class, you might be thinking that I'm just going to let you go. But then you have homeworks for the weekend. Okay. You
Yeah,
have
yeah.
some homework for the weekend. So again, I guess the teams that you're using, you must have access to some sections like the assignments and homework as well, right?
Maybe.
Maybe so you can ask Mahesh, definitely he'll let you know. And we can definitely talk to each other over the weekend. Like if you have any doubts, you can contact Mahesh, he'll connect you to me. Okay. And I can solve all those doubts on Saturdays and Sundays because you have some homework, require some, research as well. Not research like you have to write a research paper, but you will have to go through Google, find out different stuff. If you get stuck somewhere, go through documentation, because obviously it's going to be 80 hours of live course, but then add 80 hours more for self practice. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So if you have any doubt like related to what I talked about, if you have even, a single doubt which you are hesitant to ask, just go ahead. I can answer that. Like if you
Yeah.
didn't understand one particular thing or anything at all, you can let me know.
regarding that, nothing. We are good to go.
Okay.
So externally, anything extra material where we can get in insights of all these, like for the
Yeah,
extra.
definitely. So actually, when I started studying cybersecurity, like from the very basics, I started creating my own notes as well. I have those notes with me. I have them in the hard drive. I'll share them with you. So don't worry at all.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do that. It will be helpful
Yeah.
for us.
So because we are going to meet every day, like during the weekdays from 8 to 9:30, as soon as the class ends, I'm going to share, some links, some of the scripts that I've written to make my job easy, some of the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis, some of the notes that I've created, some of the labs that I use. So I'll definitely share all of that with you. Okay. So once the class ends today, like it's going to end in 2 to 3 minutes, I'm just trying to find out a way through which I can upload the homework. So I'm going to talk to Mahesh for that, and we are going to, figure out a way through which we can share homework with you. So let me just share my screen again, because I told you in the beginning of the class that there is something today. I mean, wait. So this is actually supposed to be the homework. I'm sorry, I didn't change the title for this slide. Forget about this. So this is the homework for today, guys. So Linux fundamentals, intro to networking. What is networking? So these are some basic modules on a website called TryHackMe. I haven't shown you yet how you're supposed to go about this website. So first I'm going to, create a small tutorial video that will be shared by Mahesh to you. I don't think that we should, spend 30 to 40 minutes on just setting up a platform in the class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that video with you so that you have 2 days to find out or to work around with the homework. And then when we meet on Monday, we will still talk about this stuff, but you guys will come prepared for this. Okay, makes sense. So this is the website that I've been talking about, and there is a series of labs called Linux fundamentals. It starts from the very basic. I am also going to teach you that, but if you do it with me or if you come prepared a day before, it will enhance your understanding of these concepts. Okay, so it's completely up to you guys. If you guys are busy with work on Saturday and Sunday or any family chores, then you can skip this, because I'm going to teach this on Monday as well. But if you want to come prepared, or if you don't want to waste your Saturday and Sunday and you want to ask as many questions as you want on Monday, so I would suggest you to go through these labs. Now these labs are very, very, very easy. How do you start these labs? I'll create a video for that. Okay, and that video will be shared by the KSR team. Okay, guys. So anyone who has any question related to what we covered today, or if you have any doubts, or if you want me to lower down my pace, or if you want me to make my teaching speed faster, then you can let me know. I can adapt to those changes. And yes, I know some of you are highly experienced, and some of you might be thinking, why the heck is this guy teaching me CD command? I already know that. But we have people among us who are complete freshers. So that is the reason. Initial 2 to 3 days, we are going to talk about the basic stuff so that everyone is on the same page. Once we are on the same page, we are going to start hacking. We are not going to waste any time at all. We are going to go through theory, but you guys know how boring theory is. Okay. And if you had to go through theory, you could do this via Google as well. So I'm here to teach you all practical stuff that is going to help you, you know, in the industry. Okay. So guys, if there is no question, then we can end the class and we'll figure out a way in, through which we can give you the homework and share a video that I'm going to record today after the class. Okay.